Flashy anime girls fighting in action combat. Is that a genre? I feel like it should be at this point across Senran Kagura, Valkyrie Drive, Neptunia, and a plethora of other games. They all look colorful and fun, and they usually are. Today we're talking about one such game that I inquired about just because it looked like so much colorful and flashy fun. Much smaller than the likes of Senran or Nep. Let's take a look. Here is my review of Apex Heroines for the Nintendo Switch. The story here is, well, I'm not really sure. We don't get much information about this world at all. The intro basically tells us that the Ghost Zone is an area where the nefarious Ingus is performing experiments, unleashing an army of puppets. You play as Aurora, a new recruit to the Metahuman Watch who are dispatched to deal with him. However, as soon as he's confronted, everyone but Aurora are taken out and kidnapped to different parts of the Ghost Zone to undergo experimentation. It is then up to Aurora to trek through these areas and rescue the Watch. As a story, I like the concept, though you just don't get enough information. Each area's story does give you bits of background information on each of the heroines, like Akane's hometown, but it's really random little bits and you don't end up knowing very much about this world by the time the game's over. When it comes to gameplay, this is a 3D hack and slash action game with upgrade elements thrown in. As you tackle each stage, you'll fight off waves of enemies in real-time combat and avoid hazards to advance towards the level's boss. Now the way you play this game is in levels or stages. Once you clear the intro, you have a bit of a home base or hub giving you services that'll expand as you progress through the story. You can do main missions to go through levels and rescue the other heroines, but you also have training you can go through to get currency, and various shops to buy upgrades and costumes for Aurora. The upgrades are the big thing here, as you can increase your max health, energy, and a lot of little passive abilities to make the gameplay a bit easier. As far as the actual stages, you're dropped in a 3D environment that is essentially just a set of rooms. You walk into a room and obstacles appear for you to clear, normally enemies and traps. You run around and take out all of the enemies to clear the room and then move on to the next one. Each one is slightly different in what you deal with. You get many different enemy types that attack in different ways. Some will spin and dance, requiring you to time counterattacks to damage them, while others will launch different kinds of projectiles around or just sit there and be little laser turrets. I was pretty surprised and happy with just how many different types of mobs the game introduces you to, rather than just the standard 2 or 3 types and introducing stronger variants of them as you go through. You also have traps like spinning scythes, damaging floor tiles, and little supplies that appear to give you currency, health, energy, and sometimes invulnerability. But the real fun is combat. It's rather simple, with you only having one combo available for your weapon, along with an execution mode when getting enemies down to low health. You can freely move around, dodge, dash, and jump, setting up attacks and counters as you go. And it's really the other options you have with combat that make it a bit less repetitive, with the fact that every weapon only has one combo to do. You can gain energy to do skills and chain a combo into those skills. You also have several different weapon types to choose from. Dual wielding swords, great swords, spear, hammer, etc. Each of these acts differently, like the hammer's very slow swings for big damage, and each weapon's skill is different. These are a lot of fun to experiment around with. You get a very ninja-esque dodging around combo with the dual swords, while the spear is a quick and flashy dance-like attack pattern, though you don't always have a choice between everything. Main story levels will start you with a specific weapon and give you little drops throughout the level to change things up. Sometimes you'll be able to choose almost anything, while other stages only give you 2 or 3 different options. As you advance the stage like this, you'll also run into bosses. Each level has a mid-boss that will mimic the heroine's fighting style, and then an actual boss fight with the heroine herself in order to rescue and recruit her. These are all flashy and designed around lock-on and looking for openings. At first, it almost feels Dark Souls-esque, but the more you play and get down the combat system, you realize it's not really that difficult to just keep pressuring with attacks and seeing obvious animations for attacks coming your way. Once you clear a boss, you beat the stage, take all currency back with you, and somewhat recruit that level's heroine. Technically, you can play as all of the others, but they don't become available until you have rescued all of them. I'm not a huge fan of this system. I would rather they become available at once, letting you play around with each one as the game goes by, rather than just throwing all of them into the roster at once. This process then repeats until you rescue all of the heroines and take on Ignis as the final boss. You also have trainings you can do to earn currency and stars, effectively giving you challenge stages and more difficult versions of each boss to fight, though these really just boil down to you're fighting the boss again, but there's some kind of hazard or trap in the stage. Now overall, everything about this game is kinda fun. You do similar things in each stage, but the fast pacing and flashiness of the weapon combos makes it a ton of fun to look at and feel when you are beating puppets senseless, and the constantly changing enemies and different available weapons helps it not seem too repetitive. Though it's not like you'll spend a really long time on this game anyways. The entire adventure of rescuing everybody should only take you about 5 or 6 hours to go through. There are side things you can do in the post game, but it's more or less just a short little adventure of rescuing your buddies and taking on the villain. Now let's dive into presentation. The game looks very pretty. We don't have next gen oh my goodness visuals, but it has a decent amount of detail and the models do look smooth with not very many jagged edges. This is especially prevalent in handheld mode as it's a very colorful game and everything from the effects to the environments look really nice on the Switch OLED. Performance is good as well, but not perfect. Apex tries its hardest to hit 60 FPS as much as possible. It does a fair amount of the time, but the frame rate jumps all over the place. I also noticed that when starting a stage, a lot of combos would have little hiccupy freezes from time to time, and funny enough, these happen more in docked mode than handheld. It certainly can be adjusted to in both modes, but this is a game with smoother performance when played on the go. That brings us to battery life, which is pretty standard. The original and light models get about 2 to 3 hours out of Apex Heroines, while the V2 and OLED models get 5 to 6 hours. In conclusion, Apex Heroines brings colorful hack and slash combat with cute anime girls to the Switch for a nice little adventure. Now on the downside, we know next to nothing about this game's world. There are little delays and freezes in combat controls, and you don't get more than one character to play around with until near the game's end. But if you like this sort of genre, it's a cute and fun little adventure. Reviews to Go rates Apex Heroines for the Nintendo Switch a 7.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.